Hello, world. Today I have a very, very big topic to discuss, and that is the question of whether it's better to stay in Thailand, in Chiang Rai, where I'm very happy. I have a very nice life there in the far north of Thailand, or whether I should consider moving from Thailand, coming back to Europe, and specifically coming to live here where I am right now today in Sicily. That little island, or not so little island, it's quite a big island actually, off the far south of Italy, where I am right now in Sicily. I'm on the north coast of Sicily, and the idea that has been going through my head is maybe an alternative to staying in Thailand would be to come and live in Sicily. In fact, this idea is connected with the idea of buying a very cheap house here in Sicily and renovating that house, because if it's very cheap, it's going to need some work doing on it. It's going to need some renovation, maybe some serious work to be done on it. When I say cheap, I mean we're talking here about a house that maybe only costs $10,000, $15,000 or $20,000 or euros or pounds. It's a very cheap house, I think, for a substantial property. And of course, if the house is maybe only $10,000, $15,000 or 10 or 15,000 euros or pounds, it might be necessary to spend that sort of money again on it, another $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, euros or pounds, in order to make a really nice, livable house out of it. Anyway, that's the question that I've been asking myself. Is it better to stay in Thailand, or is it maybe, for me personally, a better idea to come back to Europe? Now, the first thing I'd like to say is that I love Thailand. I think Thailand is a wonderful country. And, the Thai people, I think are wonderful people. So when I'm starting to compare life in Thailand or the possibility of living here and life in Sicily, first thing I want to say is that Thailand, for me, is a wonderful country, and the Thai people are great. The people are, my experience, and I've been there almost 3 years now in Thailand, my experience is that Thai people are very, very friendly, very helpful, very kind, very polite. I'm generalizing, of course. There are always exceptions, or exceptions to every rule. But my experience of Thai people so far has been very, very positive. Very kind people, very generous, very respectful, very polite, very tolerant, very easy people to live amongst, the Thai people. That's my personal experience after living in Thailand for 3 years. And as I say, of course, there are exceptions to every rule. In every country, in every society, in every culture, there are different people who don't fit in with this generalization. But as I say, my personal experience of Thailand has been very, very positive. I love Thailand. I love the people. I find the lifestyle is very relaxed. I find living there is very relaxed, very convenient. Let's talk about not just the people, and that's probably the most important question, but let's talk about some material aspects of Thailand. The infrastructure is incredible. I think it was probably only 10 or 15 years ago, and certainly if you go back 20 or 30 years, and if you were to talk to people in the West, in Western Europe, where I am now, about a country like Thailand, about a country in Southeast Asia, a lot of people would have said, either people who had never been there, or people who had been perhaps to Southeast Asia, they had this idea of Southeast Asia and Southeast Asian countries as being third world. I think third world is a politically incorrect word to use these days, but I think people watching this will know what I mean. People had this idea that countries like Thailand were third world, that the infrastructure was poor, that the facilities were poor, that the living standards were low. Well, I think in my experience, again, living in the north of Thailand, in Chiang Mai and now in Chiang Rai, this is not the case, not for people in my situation at least. and not true for most Thais either. It's no longer what used to be referred to as a third world country. And in fact, coming here to Sicily only now for a 3-4 week period in a sort of holiday situation, one of the things that I notice actually coming from Thailand is that in some respects, Sicily, this part of southern Europe, is more like a so-called third world country than Thailand. So coming back to the infrastructure again, coming back to Thailand and the material situation in Thailand, you have a wonderful infrastructure. You have fantastic roads. Where I live, at least in the north of Thailand, the roads are in a fantastic condition. Almost no potholes. It's amazing how, even in country areas, how they keep the roads in such good condition. Internet. I mean, all over the country, the internet is incredibly fast. Where I live in Chiang Rai, I have a glass fiber connection, a 700 megabits per second internet connection. And just comparing again very quickly with Sicily, I've stayed in 2 different places here in Sicily. For whatever reason, 2 apartments, very nice apartments, but both of these apartments have had an internet connection of about 3 megabits per second. I think the last time I had a slow internet like that was in the early days of the internet, in the 1990s, when I first had the internet, when anybody had the internet first, in the 1990s, in those days with analog connections and so on, not digital, dial-up modems and so on, using the telephone system to make an internet connection. Then I think we had internet speeds of about 3 Mbps. As I say, in Thailand, 700 megabits per second, and I'm paying about $15 a month for that in Thailand. And I think fast internet is available, accessible almost everywhere in Thailand. So that's one example. The roads, or the second example. Roads are excellent. Internet is excellent. Healthcare facilities. Now, luckily, I've had no experience of no need to check out hospitals here in Italy or in Sicily. But I know from personal experience how good they are in Thailand. Absolutely top class. People come from all over the world, especially to those top hospitals in Thailand, in the big cities like Bangkok or Chiang Mai or in Phuket, for serious treatment, high-tech treatment, top quality healthcare in Thailand. Retail, wonderful. I mean, I live in the outskirts of Chiang Rai. My house is situated in the rice fields in the suburbs of Chiang Rai. It takes me 6 minutes on my motorbike to get into the center of the city. We're talking about a city with about 500,000, a population of about 500,000. It takes me 6 minutes on the motorbike to get into the center of the city and into the shopping mall. And in that shopping mall, I have, not just me, but everybody has access to pretty well every sort of retail shop that anybody needs. All sorts of retailers, obviously all the usual ones. Clothes, a Mr. DIY for do-it-yourself type items. There's a wonderful Tops supermarket. I know this is quite expensive for most Thais, perhaps, because it tends to specialize in foodstuffs, in particular for foreigners. So there's an awful lot of food imported from all over the world. There's a lot of high-quality meat from Australia, steaks and so on from Australia or New Zealand, dairy products from Australia, New Zealand, branded goods that I'm familiar with from the UK, retail brands, tea, all sorts of products which really, that foreigners get used to consuming in their own countries. And when you come to Thailand, you just need to go into a shop like Tops and you can take it off the shelf. And it's available there. Let me tell you a little story. Today, I was up in the hillside or mountainside village where I've been looking at houses, thinking of buying a very cheap house. And I realized I'd run out of milk. Now I'm a keen tea drinker, so I need my milk for my English tea. And I found out that, in fact, in this local village where I am on the coast here, you can see the sea in the background, I think, there was nowhere to buy fresh milk. I went up to the mountain village, the village on the top of the hill. Again, only 2 or 3 little tiny stores. The grocery store, the fruit and vegetable store, for whatever reason, was closed today. Maybe it's his one day of the week when he's closed. I don't know. But anyway, there was nowhere to buy fresh milk. I had to drive about 10 kilometers to find a little supermarket where they sold fresh milk. There is a supermarket here in this village, but again, no fresh milk. When I think of Thailand, this is a country which has more or less no dairy cows. My local top supermarket in Chiang Rai has probably 10 brands of fresh milk in the cool section of that supermarket in the far north of Thailand. Every village in Thailand has at least one 7-Eleven retailer. Anybody here watching from Thailand knows how ubiquitous the 7-Eleven stores are in Thailand. Every village, every small hamlet has a 7-Eleven store. 7-Eleven is the wrong name really for these shops because they're open not from 7 in the morning until 11 in the evening. They're open 24 hours a day. All 7-Elevens in Thailand are open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And in every one of those 7-Eleven stores in Thailand, you can buy fresh milk. Here in Italy, this is a traditional, used to be a farming country. It was impossible for me without driving a round trip of about 20 kilometers to buy fresh milk. So, okay, let me come back to what I was saying before. Fantastic infrastructure in Thailand. Roads, the internet, the retail situation, healthcare. I forgot to even mention Lazada. Now again, anybody here watching this who lives in Thailand will know what I'm talking about. This is, I suppose, the equivalent of Amazon. This is the biggest online retailer in Thailand. And basically, you can buy almost anything online in Thailand and have it delivered normally if what you're buying is stocked in Thailand and does not need to be imported. It's normally delivered within 3, maximum 4 days. And the delivery person will come on a motorbike or in a small car, a van or whatever, will phone you first. They phone me first and ask me if I'm at home. And if I'm not at home, I can say, no, I'm not at home in the moment. Please come in 2 hours or something, and they'll come and deliver. At Lazada, you can buy practically anything and have it delivered within 3 or 4 days. And if it's something which typically is not from Thailand, but typically from China, that's where most of the foreign things come from that you order on Lazada, then it doesn't take 3 or 4 days. It might take 7 days because it has to come from China and has to go through customs. There are no tariffs involved. I think there's a free trade agreement in the ASEAN countries between Thailand and China. So there's no duty to be paid on goods bought in China. And it takes 2 or 3 days longer. So there we are. That's the retail situation in Thailand. I was just saying before I start on Italy, I wanted to say how great I think Thailand is. Wonderful country, wonderful people, fantastic infrastructure, retail and the rest of it, online retail and so on. Let's be honest, low costs as well. I mean, that is, for most foreigners living in Thailand, I would say the cost of living is one of the big factors. People maybe are reluctant to talk about it so openly. Talk about other things, talk about the weather, talk about the people, talk about the food, of course, wonderful Thai food, but don't talk about the fact that it is, with few exceptions, a very cheap country. There are not many things in Thailand which are more expensive than in Western countries, in Western Europe or North America or Australia. Almost everything is a lot cheaper. For example, here I'm renting a very nice little apartment, but it's in a small village in the north of Sicily. It's not near a big city. It's relatively speaking remote, and as I said before, it's not a place you can buy fresh milk. And I'm paying about 60 euros a night for a very nice apartment, as you can see, with a view of the sea here and a little terrace outside. So I'm not complaining about the apartment, but 60 euros in Thailand, or $70, shall we say, in Thailand, is a huge amount. It would be a huge amount to pay for an apartment, for a night in an apartment or a hotel, except perhaps in Bangkok. typically when I travel in Thailand, I pay 400-500 baht for a very nice, clean, comfortable hotel room. That's $15, not 60 or 70, which is what I'm paying here. So that's just a comparison. It's very good value. It's very cheap in Thailand. That's one of the other big advantages with Thailand. So those are all the positive things. Everything I've said so far has been how great it is in Thailand. And I believe that. If I can considering the idea of buying a little house here in Sicily and moving to Thailand, moving to Sicily, it's not because I'm unhappy with Thailand or I think Thailand's not a great place. I think it's a great place and great people. So a couple of downsides. Let's look at the few downsides because it's always a mix. Whatever question you look at, there are pros and cons. There are advantages and disadvantages. Let's look at a couple of disadvantages with living in Thailand. So, I am now 70. I was 70, became 70 this year, a couple of months ago. So, okay, one of the things I have to think about, not right now, because luckily I've been very healthy. Most of my life, nearly all of my life, I've had no health conditions of any sort. But I know I assume in 10 or 15 years' time, I'm going to have to start thinking about, whether I'm living in the right part of the world in order to get access to good and affordable health care. So one thing I have to do if I stay in Thailand is to continue to have a private health insurance, which I have already at the moment in Thailand, and I'll have to continue to have that. So that's a downside, I would say. Living in Thailand, in my opinion, some people don't bother with it, but I wouldn't feel happy if I didn't know that I had a health insurance policy which I can rely on if I need some sort of especially serious healthcare treatment, whatever it might be, cancer or something like that. I have an insurance policy which covers me for really serious health conditions, including, for example, cancer. Or if I have a motorbike accident on the road and I need to be rushed into the emergency department of a hospital, I've got an insurance policy which covers me for the costs of treatment. So that's a downside. I need to have health insurance. If I were to move to Italy as a European, an EU citizen, I can depend on the universal healthcare system, which applies right across the whole of Europe. And at my age, I wouldn't need to make any contributions towards that. And that European healthcare system gives me basically free healthcare across the whole of Europe, and including, of course, here in Sicily, if I were to come and live here in Sicily. So that's a negative comparison, Thailand against Sicily. Then we have the question of visas. Again, if I stay in Thailand and live there on a permanent basis, I will continue to need some sort of long-term visa. At the moment, I have a 12-month retirement visa, and that costs money. Realistically, I suppose, even if you use an agency, which can be a cheaper way of getting a 12-month retirement visa, you're talking probably about $800 a year for a visa. I think personally it's not so much about the cost of that visa, it's about the uncertainty associated with being a foreigner in Thailand and having no right to live there. I'm not suggesting for a moment that the Thais are planning to deport millions of foreigners who are now living in Thailand, but it's a possibility. They have that right. If for whatever reason they chose to do so, they could ask or tell all the foreigners living at the moment in Thailand to leave. None of us has the right to live there. If, on the other hand, I came to live here in Sicily, I would have the right as an EU citizen to live not only in my own country, where my own citizenship is and my own passport comes from, I have the right to live in something like 28 different European countries, including Italy. And not only that, but also the right to buy, if I have the money, to buy property here, to buy a house and buy the land that that house is built on. I have the right to buy a house and a piece of land anywhere in Europe. In Thailand, I need a visa, And theoretically, the government can ask me or any other foreigner to leave the country practically at any time if they so chose to do so. In Italy or in Europe, it's not the case. I have the right to live here. So that's a negative comparison with Thailand and Sicily. I can buy property, I can buy land in Europe. I cannot buy land in Thailand. The health insurance I mentioned before, it's something I would need. I do need in Thailand. I don't need here anywhere in any EU country, actually. I've written down here climate. I'm not sure if that's a real comparison. Actually, one of the reasons that I'm checking out Sicily specifically is because this part of Europe, actually, if you consider it part of mainland Europe, it almost is. There's a very small stretch of water between Sicily and mainland Italy. It's almost part of mainland Italy. But this part of Europe is the warmest, has the most sunshine of any part of Europe, any part of mainland Europe. Only I think the Canary Islands down in Africa have more sunshine and a warmer climate than this. This is probably the warmest part of mainland Europe. Thailand, I would say actually, Thailand, of course, has a very tropical climate and very hot, and it's very humid. So I would say probably so far, and I've only been here 2 or 3 weeks in Sicily, for me the climate is a bit more agreeable here now at the end of September, the beginning of October. Today is actually the beginning of October. It's more agreeable for me as a Western European. It's easier for me. It's not quite as hot. It's probably today was in the high 20s. Rather than the mid-30s as it probably would be back home, I say, in Thailand. And the humidity is much lower here. So I find right now, at the end of September, beginning of October, I do find the climate, the weather right now for me, is preferable to that of Thailand. But I'm happy with the weather in Thailand. I've become acclimatized quite well to the Thai climate. But this, as I say, this particular part of Europe has probably does have statistically the best climate in Europe. So if I were to live here permanently and live nowhere else, it means, for example, that in the winter period, in the winter months, November, December, January, February, whatever, I probably need to heat my property, my house, my flat, less than I would need to in other parts of Europe. And of course, that's an expense. It's something I would save by not having to heat so much. So that's an advantage living in this part of southern Europe. I don't need to heat anything at all in Thailand, of course. A lot of people would use air conditioning. I don't use it myself in Thailand, but so that's a cost factor here if I were to stay here 12 months of the year. Another difference, another comparison, and one reason I'm thinking about the idea of moving, relocating. I cannot work in Thailand. It is possible for foreigners to work in Thailand if they have a work visa. Probably, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but I think probably 80 or 90% of all the foreigners living in Thailand who have work visas, I'm guessing, but I think probably 80% of them are teachers, English teachers. And one of the benefits of having a job as an English teacher in Thailand is that obviously in that case it entitles you to work as a teacher. Don't think it entitles you to do any other sort of work. But that's a difference again between Europe and Thailand. One of the ideas I have about relocating to Europe is to buy a house, buy a property, find a property, buy a property which I can divide between the part where I'm living, maybe 12 months, maybe 6 months of the year, and the rest of that property which I would rent out on a short-term basis, like the apartment I'm staying in right now, and paying about $60, $70 a night for, right outside at the end of the season, beginning of October, $70 a night here. And I would have the legal right, I would be allowed to do that here in Europe and in Sicily, be allowed to have a rental property which I rent out on a short-term basis, Airbnb, that sort of thing. I wouldn't be allowed to do that in Thailand, not unless I have a work permit, a visa, with explicit permission to be a landlord of a rental property. If I don't have that, I would be breaking the law if I wanted to rent out a property in Thailand. So, another difference. And this is part of the idea that I have with Europe is to do this, is to buy a property and create an income for myself in my old age, as I say over the age of 70 now. Create an income, a rental income, Airbnb type income for myself. So let's get on specifically talk about Sicily. Now, Sicily is a place I've never been to before. I've been here 2 or 3 weeks. This is the first time in my life that I've ever been here. I wonder, actually, having now come here, why I never came here before. It's a wonderful island. It's very, very rich in history, and I'm personally very interested in history. This island has a history going back to the Greeks. We're talking thousands of years ago. There are Greek temples here, ruins, temples built by the Greeks 3,000-4,000 years ago. The island was colonized by the Greeks 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. It's been colonized not only by the Greeks, it's been colonized by the Greeks, by the Arabs, been colonized by the Normans from northern France and actually originally from Scandinavia, and it's been colonized in the Renaissance period by the Spanish. I've probably forgotten somebody that's colonized Sicily, but it's got wonderful, wonderful history, wonderful culture, fantastic architecture, fantastic food. Just like Thailand is famous for its food, so too is Italy, and specifically, of course, this Mediterranean cuisine here down in Sicily. Wonderful food, wonderful seafood, of course, in particular, in coastal areas like this where I am right now. You've got, as I say, you've got a wonderful history, wonderful culture, wonderful food, great climate, actually even fantastic roads for biking. I mean, one thing I love in Thailand is riding my motorbike on those country roads, those mountain roads, those country roads, those twisty roads. And just driving up here from Catania a few days ago, I noticed how wonderful these roads also in Sicily are for people on motorbikes. One thing that shocked and surprised me a little bit, actually, was seeing that so many of the Italian bikers here are riding BMW GSs, mostly GSs, but the Boxer motor BMW. I had hoped and expected to see a few more Italian bikes, specifically Moto Guzzi, but I discovered that BMW is true to its reputation, that the BMW GS is indeed the market leader of the bigger motorbikes, and you see that here in Sicily. So maybe if I ever do come and live here in Sicily, I will get myself a second-hand, much cheaper, second-hand BMW GS or something similar if I come and live here in Sicily. I actually hoped to do a road test on a Moto Guzzi. I went to a dealer in Catania a few days ago and was very disappointed when they told me that foreigners who are not registered as living in Sicily or in Italy are not allowed, because the insurance won't cover them, are not allowed to test ride motorbikes. I was very disappointed. I had my eye on a V7, a Moto Guzzi, a bike I'd never ridden, and thinking this is an Italian-made bike. It's not just an Italian brand like Benelli, which is made in China. This is Moto Guzzi, a bike which is actually made in Italy. Anyway, I wasn't allowed to have that bike and test ride it because I'm not registered, not yet at least, registered and living here in Italy. So, some of the great things I noticed here about Sicily, as I say, well, it's famous for its history, famous for its culture, famous for its food, its climate, and even, as I said, wonderful roads for bikers like me. let's come and talk a little bit about the housing situation. Now, I followed on YouTube, and I've watched quite a few videos about the whole topic of so-called €1 houses. Maybe some people watching this have also heard about this idea of €1 houses. A little bit of history about this. What has happened over many, many decades is that there's been a big depopulation of the country villages in particular, the small mountain villages, small towns and villages in Italy, especially in southern Italy. This is a phenomenon which goes back decades. In fact, it probably goes back 100 years. It goes back to the 1920s and 1930s, when there were huge waves of immigration of Italians and Sicilians going especially to other parts of Europe, or of course to North America. Everybody's watched, The Godfather, and that's something very relevant for Sicily, because that was a story about a Sicilian family or families who emigrated from Sicily to the States. And this is a process that's been going on a long, long time. So what's happened in these especially remote villages and towns, it has been a huge process of depopulation. Many people, whole families have got up and emigrated, and you'll find, including the little village that I'm looking at houses in at the moment, here in the north coast of Sicily, you will find many properties. Maybe even half of the properties of that village are empty. And they haven't just been empty for a year or two or a month or two. They've been empty, some of them, for decades and decades. And so the local governments in those villages had the idea a few years ago of, and in some cases at least, maybe in many cases, the properties are actually owned now by the commune, by the local government, because the owners, the original owners, 50, 60, 70 years ago, have no connection anymore with the villages and towns they came from originally in Sicily. They've given up on those properties. They don't look after them, and they never visit them. They don't want to visit them. They've given them away. As far as they're concerned, anybody can have them, and the commune has become responsible for maintenance or whatever of those properties. So some communes had an idea a few years ago of offering those houses as so-called €1 houses, technically for a very nominal sum of €1, in practice normally a few thousand. It's possible for anybody, any foreigner, to buy one of those houses, precondition, which they're often buying from the commune. The house has become possessed over the years, over the decades, by the commune, by the local government. That person who buys the house, whether an Italian or a foreigner, buys it for a very low price, technically, theoretically €1, but as I say, it could be more, typically 5,000 or 10,000 euros, dollars, whatever. They buy the house, but they're then obliged to spend a certain amount of money renovating that property within a particular period of time. I think normally it's 2 years. They have to then commit themselves and show that they are spending 10, 20, 30,000 euros, dollars, whatever, on that property. The idea is, of course, that the commune then finds somebody who will look after that house, who will live in that property, at least if they're an American, for example, they live in it for several months a year, even if they're not allowed to live in it permanently because they don't have a right, because they bought that property, they don't have an immediate or automatic right to live permanently in Italy. They don't receive a visa, a residence visa to live in Sicily just because they bought themselves a cheap house. Unless, of course, they have Italian ancestry and they can claim citizenship through their ancestors and so on. But Europeans, as I said before, Europeans like myself, we have the right to live here. It's not an issue for us. If I buy a house here in Sicily, I'm able to live in it 12 months of the year if I wish. I don't have any visa issues living here in Sicily. So that's the plan. The idea was that these communes had was to offer these old, often, frankly, ruins. Actually, in some cases, the very, very cheap ones are little more than ruins. The roof might be missing. So, of course, if you're going to make that house habitable, you really do need to spend serious money on bringing that up to scratch. Now, I went to look at a house just a couple of days ago, to give you an idea. In the village, on the hill, above this place I am now. It's 4 kilometers up the hill, literally up a steep hill. This is a village with a history going back 2,500 years. People lived in that village, or what was a settlement of some sort. It wasn't obviously the same as the village now. But people lived in that location 2,400, 2,500 years ago. So it's got a very long history, this village. And I went to look at a house in that village. To give you an idea, that house costs less than 30,000 euros and has a size of about 260 square meters. You have to work that out into square feet. But it's a very, very substantial property on many different levels, on 4 stories, and spread across 3 different properties. There are actually 4 different entrances, 2 at the back and 2 at the front on the street, on 2 different streets, one at the front of the house and one at the back of that house. It's a very, very substantial property. So far as I could see, there's no major structural work that needs to be done on that house. As far as I could see, the roof, or the roofs, because the roof spreads across quite a large building on that street. There was no need to repair or replace the roof on that building. I didn't see any sign of water leakage or anything of that sort, something that could be expensive to fix. So far as I could see, the main costs involved in bringing that house, that property, up to sort of 21st century standards would be largely cosmetic. In other words, replacing the kitchens. I say kitchens because, in fact, this property can be divided quite well into 2 separate units. A larger one, where I would live, that would be my full-time residence, and a smaller one, we're talking small, of about 90 square meters. That's still a substantial property. Smaller property, which I could use as an Airbnb, as a let, and get some regular income from that property. And what would need to be done is to upgrade the kitchens. Say kitchen in one side of the house, the rental side, for use for short-term rentals, and the kitchen in my side of the house where I would live. They would both need replacing. The bathrooms, again, more than one bathroom in this property, would need, in my opinion, replacement. Old bathrooms, very old. I would do a total renovation, put in the latest, modern tiling, modern flooring, and so on. I would probably put a solar heater. That's not an electric-powered solar heater. That's a sun-powered solar heater, 200-liter tank or whatever it is, on the roof with those glass vacuum panels to heat the water. This is a perfect location for getting solar-powered hot water. Put that on the roof of the house. Anyway, that's one of the things I would do. And then, of course, decorative changes, completely repaint, maybe refloor the property, maybe have to check the wiring. So that's an idea that I have, buying a very large property in a wonderful location. And I know that looking now at this, you can see some video I took of looking around that property with the owner who was there, the lady who was the owner of that property, and the estate agents who showed me the house. And you can see from the video I took, you can see there are views, even from the lower floors of that property. I think there are 4 balconies. And from at least 2 or 3 of those balconies, you can see the sea. You can see this view. And I think quite possibly it's something I need to investigate. I think that particular house has potential, with the right planning permission, of course, to put a small terrace, maybe just a small terrace big enough to seat 4 or 5 people, on the roof of that property, and that would give a wonderful panoramic view of the sea from the roof of that property. That's another thing that I would probably want to do, and that would be in the rental part of the house, where for example, the Airbnb tenants would be staying. They would then have access to a brand new terrace on the roof where they could sit in the evening, like now, late afternoon, and have a glass of local red wine or whatever. So I think that's a wonderful property, what I've seen of it so far, and very attractive price. It's not a €1 property. It's not being sold by the commune. It's not being sold by the government in that village. It's being sold by the lady who owns it, who was there with me when I looked at it. So it's not part of this scheme, this official €1 house scheme, but it is, a very, in my opinion, very good value house, a very cheap house for its size and for its location. That house is located less than a 1-minute walk from the ramparts on the edge of the village, with a clear, uncluttered, unhindered view of the sea. Wonderful view within a 60-second walk of the front door of that house. Wonderful location. So that's the reason that I've asked this question. Is it better for me at my age, and maybe in 10 years' time when I'm not 70 but 80, would it be better for me to live maybe in a quiet Sicilian mountain village with a very attractive property, substantial property, with some rental income? I'm making the assumption if I renovated that house for short-term rental guests that I would be able to rent it out. Not, of course, 30 days a month, not 100% of the time, but if I got it rented out in that season between March and October, say the high season I call that in Europe, if I rented it out for 50% of the time, if I got an income of, I don't know what, a net income of €1,000 on $1,000 or more every month, that for me is a substantial income, something I don't have in Thailand. So that's an idea I've had. Now, coming back to Thailand again, I have it's not mine house, but I rent a very, very attractive house in Thailand. It's on the outskirts of Chiang Rai, and as I said before, it's only a 6-minute motorbike ride from my house in the rice fields of Chiang Rai to the center of the city, where I can, for example, do some wonderful shopping and where I can buy fresh milk. That house, and you're looking at it now, situated. It's unlike the house here in the village, which is a sort of an old terraced house. So it has houses on each side of it. That house I'm living in Thailand is a detached house, self-contained detached house. So there's some space between my house and the neighbors, a little bit of land around the house. That's something which is very different, the situation in Thailand to the situation, specifically about that house I looked at in the local village here. Typically, the village houses, of course, are terraced houses. There are very few completely detached properties in these old villages. So that's an attractive house I have in Thailand. It also needs some work doing on it, but I'm renting that house. And I won't do any real work. I won't spend any real significant money on that house unless or until I own the house. It is possible for a foreigner to own a house in Thailand. The one thing a foreigner cannot do, may not do, is own land. What normally happens is that foreigners are married to Thais. Typically it's a foreign man who's married to a Thai lady, and the property, the land, is owned by her and her family. And he may have bought it, he may have paid the money for it, but it's actually in her name, because only Thais may own land in Thailand. Foreigners can own a condominium. They cannot own the land it's built on, and the same goes for a house. So my house in Chiang Rai, I could buy that house if I have the money to buy it, and if we agreed a right price with the owner. And actually the owner, he told me himself, the Thai owner who lives in Bangkok, told me he wants to sell that house. And if I were to stay in Thailand, and it's still a big possibility I will stay in Thailand, I would be very interested in buying that house. But what I would like to do and want to do, otherwise I bought a house on land which is rented, I have no security. But theoretically, I could lease the land that house is built on. I have the right as a foreigner to lease land. And a lease contract may be up to 30 years long, maximum 30 years. So here's me at the age of 70, I could theoretically make a 30-year lease for the land my house is built on, which would take me, of course, up to the age of 100, which is probably, who knows, but probably more than I need for my lifetime. If I agreed the right price, if my landlord who owns the house agreed the right price to sell the house, agreed to lease me the house, preferably for 30 years, the maximum period allowed, and that would be important for me, if the lease allowed me, that would be very important, gave me the right, for example, when I sell the house, to sell the remainder of the lease, so that if I lease the land for 30 years, and after 15 years decide I do want to live full time, for example, in Sicily, I could sell the remaining 15 years of the lease together with the house. I can sell the house anyway. I have my right to buy and to sell the house. That's not a problem for a foreigner, but I cannot buy and sell the land. But if I had a lease agreement for the land and was allowed, if I wanted to sell the lease or pass on the lease together with the house which I'm selling, that would give me, in my opinion, more or less the same rights and freedoms and flexibility as somebody who owns the house and the land. That would be an attractive proposition. And coming back to my initial question, whether I should consider living full-time in Sicily or full-time in Thailand, if I were to get the house I'm living in now in Thailand for about the same sort of price that this house in Chiang Rai is being offered for, and of course I haven't actually discussed with the owner, haven't discussed prices with that lady, but if we were to agree the sort of price I have in mind for that house, and if I were able to get the house I'm living in Chiang Rai for the same sort of price, and the land leased, preferably on a 30-year lease, for the same sort of price together, that I would be buying the house and the land it's built on here in Sicily, that would be actually, in my opinion, coming back to the original question, the perfect arrangement, the perfect solution. Because then, with the new visa arrangements in Thailand, of course they can change. We know that those visa arrangements that the Thai government has for foreigners coming either to live in the country or to visit as tourists, those arrangements, those visas can change. They can change from day to day or month to month and year to year. But at the moment, for example, right now, regular foreign tourists from most countries in the world have a 60-day, actually it's not a visa, it's an exemption from visa. So you don't need a visa for up to 60 days as a foreign tourist in Thailand. It's then possible, I think for 2,000 baht, which is what? About $60, to extend that 60 days with a 30-day visa. So you get 3 months for the price of about $60. You don't need a retirement visa to stay 3 months in Thailand. And you can do that 3 months in any calendar year. That's the agreement at the moment. So the arrangement. It means you can come to Thailand on the 1st of October, which I think was yesterday, 1st of October, with a 60-day visa extension, pay about $60 to extend that another 30 days. You can stay from the beginning of October to the end of the year with more or less a sort of $60 visa, if you like. And that's the maximum you're allowed to do that in one calendar year. And then I think you may need to leave the country, which would be easy for me to do up in Chiang Rai. I can go to Lao, which is 50-odd kilometers down the road from where I live, cross the border, spend a night or two in Laos, come back again at the beginning of January, come back again with another 60 days, plus a 30-day extension. So my idea is this. In an ideal world, if I have the right terms and conditions. So I talked so long that my battery ran out on the camera. I had to stop, recharge the battery a bit and start again. But I've come pretty well to the end of my little talk, I think. So my idea is this. In an ideal world, perhaps, I would be able to buy a property like the one I went to look at up in the village. I would be able to create an Airbnb type rental apartment as part of that property, which will give me an income during the main European season, which I would say is probably March to October. I would live there in those months of the year, so I wouldn't be there necessarily unless I wanted to be in the European Sicilian winter, which can also, I think, become quite cold. But in those winter months, especially if I were able to buy the house I'm living in Thailand, lease the land that the house is built on a preferably very long-term lease, 15, 20, 30 years, I would then be able, with the current visa situation, to spend 3 months of the year from October to December in Thailand with basically a tourist visa, leave the country at the end of December, come back again on a new visa for 2 months, tourist visa, extend that by another month. So basically, the way things are at the moment, and of course that can change, I would be able to have more or less 6 months in Thailand. I might have to leave the country halfway through to renew my visa, my tourist visa. But I could spend 6 months of the year in a wonderful country of Thailand, which, as I said at the beginning, wonderful place, wonderful country, beautiful people, great food, great place to be, very relaxed, very laid back. Live 6 months of the year there in Thailand during the European winter, the Sicilian winter, when, of course, the weather is actually the best it ever gets in the north of Thailand, especially the months of November, December, and January. Excuse me, that's the high season in Thailand, in the north of Thailand. Anyway, and the low season and the winter here in Sicily. So I spend the main season of the year here, March to October, in my property in the mountain village, the ancient village on the mountain, 2,500 years of habitation, and spend about 6 months of the year in Thailand, in my house in Thailand. I think that's a dream for me. That's my idea of a sort of dream scenario. I don't know how realistic it is. I'm very curious to hear what you think about this whole question of where it's better to live, Thailand or Italy or somewhere else in Europe. I think it would be great if you were prepared to send a message, to write your opinion after watching this video. Give me your opinion about this. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost anything. I've now done about 35 videos, and I have 350 subscribers. So, as I was saying before, I really hope that you found this video interesting today, this comparison, the whole idea about whether it's better to stay in Thailand, live in Thailand, wonderful country, wonderful people, or maybe to think about relocating, living here in Europe, in the far south of Europe, in Sicily. I would really welcome your opinion about this. So please tell me what you think. Write in the section below. Give me your opinion about this, whether you think it's something worth considering or not. And please subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost anything. I would really like to build this channel into something that actually starts paying me back sometime after I get 1,000 subscribers. At the moment, I only have about 350 subscribers. I've done 35 videos, but I've only got 350 subscribers, so I have some way to go. I would really appreciate it very much if you sign on that, click on that subscribe button, click on the like button, that helps as well, and also write me your comments, your opinion about this whole subject of where it's better to live, Europe, Sicily, Italy, Thailand. I would really appreciate that. Thank you very, very, very much indeed for watching today. I hope that you become a new member of this channel if you're not already. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much. And bye-bye from Sicily.